I'm Brad Rodriguez from Fix This Build That, and today we're building a nightstand with a secret drawer. Now the nightstand is a pretty basic piece, so I'm going to blitz through a lot of the build process. I'll focus on some tips and tricks, but mainly the secret compartment. I used walnut plywood with mitered corners and a dadoed center divider for the cabinet. Here's a little montage of what I did to get to the glue up. Alright, it's the next day and I took this out of the clamps. There are some gaps down here, but I think we can close those up and be okay. I used the screwdriver trick to close up the gaps as best I could, and I filled them with sawdust and wood glue until they looked passable. Now for the drawer fronts, I used solid walnut. I used SketchUp, a 3D drawing software, to draw out a grid of intersecting lines. Now from there, I brought it into Easel, the software my Inventable's X-Carve CNC uses. I set all the cut lines to 1/8 of an inch deep for the lower drawer front. But for the upper drawer, I chose one special diamond piece, and I set it to cut all the way through the board, just leaving 2 little tabs to hold it in place. I fired up the X-Carve and I cut the bottom drawer front while I went back and cut the edge banding to size. The bottom drawer front came out awesome, so I set up the cut for that upper drawer front and let it go while I glued on the trim. The top drawer worked perfect too, and you can see the cutout going all the way through here. These came out really nicely off the CNC. I did just a little bit of cleanup. Now what I'm going to do is prep these for the pour. I'm going to pour them both at the same time. I'm going to take this out, I'm going to wrap it in Tyvek and then put the spacers in there to be buried into the epoxy. Well, one thing I did here I didn't before was to put some paste wax on the outside of the piece to help it release easier. Now for the pour, I used Total Boat High Performance epoxy with a slow hardener and some light blue pigment. And while the epoxy was curing, I switched over to the base for the nightstand. I went with 14 gauge steel square tube, and after a few quick cuts and some grinding, I was ready to weld. And then I sprayed on a couple coats of primer and metallic gold finish. I took off the tape and I ran them through my planer, and everything was looking great. I was a little worried that I was going to jar the piece loose, so I did finish off sanding by hand. Now to make the hidden button look seamless, I needed to make sure that it sat flush to the front surface. I decided to use the X-Carve again and to route out 1/8 of an inch deep recess across the back of the shape. And the idea was I could attach a small metal plate and push that from behind to make it flush on the front. We are ready to go. I'm going to pop out the piece. I'm going to use a little offcut from the test scrap to do it. Oh, there it goes. Oh yeah. And then I jumped into making the drawer. I cut all the parts for the drawers, and we're gonna have actually 3 drawers in this. We're gonna have a bottom drawer that is just a normal drawer. We're going to have a top drawer that is gonna be this weird conglomeration of a thing that looks like a normal drawer, but when you push the secret button, the secret drawer comes out. Now pocket holes make drawers go together like a snap. I'm using a floating bottom panel in all these drawers. And here's how the top drawer goes together. Now the lower parts will be the front and right side of the drawer. I cut the drawer fronts down to size to fit my design, but I also cut a plywood front and attached it to the drawer first. I installed the slides for the secret compartment onto the back of the drawer and on that temporary front. And after doing that, I knew exactly how big the drawer needed to be. I cut the parts to size and I assembled the small drawer. After I attached the drawer, I added in a spring to the back. The spring is going to shoot the drawer out once that button is pushed for an extra cool factor. I just used a small piece of dowel drilled into the main drawer, and this holds onto a spring that fits perfectly over the dowel and leaves enough room to compress and push that drawer out. I grabbed a scrap of 1/8 inch plate steel and I cut out a little piece to fit in the pocket on the back of that drawer front that we had just CNC'd. Then I drilled 2 holes in the back of the plate and attached it to the button. I put a couple small magnets into the walnut and it worked like a charm. I went ahead and mounted the slides in the lower drawer, which were very straightforward since it didn't matter where they went in that opening. I took a quick break and I finished sanded the fronts and put on some Rubio Pure. And now I could get back to mounting the upper drawer slides, which took a lot of calculating.
All right.
I removed the temporary front and I attached the walnut front. I used the measurements from the mock-up to position everything for a consistent reveal, and by some miracle, I got it perfect on the first go.
Oh, yes, 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 yes.
All right, that drawer front fits so nice. This is the spring I'm using to do the release trigger, and it's just a very simple strip of thin plywood at an angle dug into the side, and what's gonna happen is that's going to slide in. You can barely even hear it. Now when it's pressed down, that will no longer allow it to move forward until that button is pushed. Now the spring sits at an angle that's made by chiseling out a little indent and screwing down the strip of wood. All right guys, this is the first go at it. Let's see if it locks in. It locked! So now I gotta install it and see if it'll unlock. Okay, I'm gonna put the spring in. Now we're gonna lock it back. Now I'm gonna push it. Comes out, the button is pressed in a bit here. And now watch this. Yes, it works. Now after I came down off my high, I made a false front for the secret drawer. I finished the rest of the cabinet, installed the base and drawer pulls, and this thing looks like $1,000,000. And the secret drawer is totally invisible even upon close inspection.